Mike Johnson genuinely has no idea what move to make next, but what he has decided to do is go after Donald Trump. Because right now, both Johnson and Trump are in the weakest positions they've ever been in. Johnson's authority exists mostly because of his title as Speaker of the House, but in reality, he's seen largely as a puppet of Donald Trump, and Trump himself currently has zero real control over the Republican Party. A party dealing with its slimmest majority in Congress thanks to the death of one member, the hospitalization of another, and additional resignations. So Mike Johnson is desperately trying to hold what's left of his coalition together, and sometimes that means taking shots at Trump, which is exactly what he did this morning as the Greenland issue grows, something Trump wants to push, and Johnson clearly doesn't. We're going to break it all down. But before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already and you enjoy our channel, hit that subscribe button because it really supports our work. Now, before we get into Johnson's comments, I want to start with what Chris Murphy said last night about why we need to pay more attention to Greenland, and why it may be more than just another distraction Trump is using to steer attention away from the Epstein files.
But yeah, this seems more serious now because that is certainly the kind of thing that can set dominoes off. We shouldn't put Venezuela in our rearview mirror. Nope. Just today, you're starting to see, some unrest in the capital. That is a place full of very dangerous guerrilla groups. What does he think our obligation is? Should, his chosen leader, Delcy Rodriguez, be disposed? That could get more messy. But the consequence of Greenland becoming an actual thing we have to worry about is earth-shattering because it is the end of NATO. It is a massive interruption in the U.S.-European alliance structure. And if you listen, I think people are sort of tired of being told that they should care about Europe, but there is really no way to manage and confront the rise of China without the United States and Europe working together. And so Greenland, if he ever did anything to try to move there, would just be the biggest gift ever constructed for China because they would get kind of a free ride to global primacy as the United States and Europe were at war with each other. So that's a big deal, and we should probably stop thinking about it as a sideshow.
Is Donald Trump really planning to deploy our military to Greenland? It sounds unbelievable that this is even a serious question, but here we are. We asked the same thing back during Trump's presidency, and at that time things were going well enough for him politically that he backed off. Remember JD and Usha going there for barely half an hour, nobody wanting to meet them, and a military official getting fired just for saying they didn't want to participate? That's how long this has been bubbling in the background. But now, we actually have to take it much more seriously because Trump can clearly see what's happening. He realizes he no longer has the level of control over his own coalition that he once did. A lot of MAGA Republicans are turning against him. Some are outright resigning, and his grip on power inside the party is slipping. So instead of relying on political loyalty, Trump appears to be shifting toward a broader authoritarian push, trying to justify some absurd need for territorial expansion. It makes no logical sense. And all of this is happening while we're watching Trump in obvious cognitive decline. So who's actually steering these agendas? It increasingly looks like Stephen Miller. He's reportedly taking the lead on Venezuela alongside Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth, and the ones pushing hardest for intervention seem to be Miller, Rubio, and Hegseth. Rubio even explicitly did so here, and that's what triggered Mike Johnson's reaction.
They said the military option is on the table. So is the administration really willing to risk the NATO alliance by potentially moving ahead?
Guys,
military option?
What I think the White House said yesterday is what I will tell you now, and I've always said. The president always retained the option. Every president, not this president, every president always retains the option. I'm not talking about Greenland. I'm just talking about globally. If the president identifies a threat to the national security of the United States, every president retains the option to address it through military means. As a diplomat, which is what I am now, and what we work on, we always prefer to settle it in different ways. That included in Venezuela. We tried repeatedly to reach an outcome here that did not involve having to go in and grab an indicted drug trafficker. Those were unsuccessful, unfortunately.
So let's remember something important here as Marco Rubio insists that every option is still on the table. Congress has a role in this. Donald Trump previously claimed Congress had no authority over what he did in Venezuela, the illegal attack and attempted kidnapping of Maduro, because he framed it as a police action, not a military operation. But now Pete Hegseth is openly suggesting it was a military operation. And if Trump is actually considering sending U.S. forces into Greenland, that is undeniably a full-scale military operation. That's exactly why Senator Ruben Goh is pushing forward with a resolution to stop Trump from doing it. Yet at the same time, he's hinting that he actually wants troops on the ground. Katie Miller is posting about it. Stephen Miller went on CNN yelling about it. And they keep circling back to this argument that Greenland is some critically strategic national security asset, usually framed as protection against Russia. Funny how that argument never seems to lead them to support Ukraine. But that's another issue. The point is, Stephen Miller wants this. Pete Hegseth wants this. Donald Trump wants this. Meanwhile, Republicans in Congress are furious. This whole situation is politically radioactive for them. A massive weight dragging them down, which is why Mike Johnson could barely muster a response when asked about it this morning, before ultimately brushing Trump off altogether.
Just to follow up, because you say that there's military action is not going to happen. So then, is it responsible for the White House to continue to raise the specter of military action? They said very explicitly.
I've spoken to the question. I'm not gonna take 1,000 gotcha questions this morning trying to pit me against the White House. It is. I've said I can't be more clear than I have been on this. I've given lengthy statements on it. You know where I stand. You know where the House stands. We're going to get a briefing today, and then we'll see how it develops. So everybody relax. Yes.
Last question.
The reason Mike Johnson avoids answering gotcha questions is simple. The people who could punish him are his own Republicans, members of a caucus that isn't even a majority anymore. Marjorie Taylor Greene's resignation, the passing of a California Republican, and the hospitalization of an 80-year-old Republican in Indiana have left Mike Johnson with no votes at all. His majority has effectively vanished. Sure, Marjorie Taylor Greene's seat might eventually be filled, giving him one vote back, and Mikey Sherrill, newly elected governor, will have her seat replaced as well, balancing things again. But right now, Johnson isn't in a position to cross anyone in his party if he wants to remain speaker. That gives figures like Don Bacon, who has openly threatened resignation, far more leverage. It also empowers someone like Thomas Massie, who is firmly opposed to Donald Trump. Johnson is acutely aware that Trump has lost control over MAGA, and he knows that an invasion of Greenland would be politically toxic, completely against what his caucus supports. Right now, Mike Johnson is acting in self-preservation. He doesn't want to upset Trump, and he doesn't want to rile up his base. Yet, he did make one comment about Greenland that directly contradicts Trump's ideology, which I found particularly telling.
When President Trump has talked about military action in Greenland, he said that there didn't need to be military notification or that this wasn't a war act in Venezuela. If there is military action in Greenland, would Congress need authorization? And also, would Congress need authorization for need to have power of the purse for control of oil in Venezuela?
Okay, let me address them in turn. We're not at war with Greenland. We have no intention of being it. We have no reason to be at war with Greenland, okay? Everybody knows there's geopolitical and strategic importance of that landmass, and that's what everyone has talked about. By the way, this is not just President Trump. I think this goes back to Truman. Like many presidents have acknowledged the strategic placement of Greenland and how important that could be to our country. And the president's talked about that, rare earth minerals and other things. They're talking about diplomatic channels for this, okay? There's lots been said about it, but I know this personally because I talked to the governor of my state a couple of days ago, Jeff Landry, who has been appointed to be our person there, our individual who would go and help with these negotiations.
Right now, Mike Johnson is in an impossible spot. Trump claims he'd go to war with Greenland, and Rubio echoes it. But Johnson is a perfect example of the GOP's current chaos. Broken promises, lost ideology, and zero control. Trump pushes these extreme foreign policies with no real plan, distracting from Epstein and trying to expand his authoritarian influence, while Johnson's caucus has no majority and knows going along would sink them in the midterms. Johnson avoids commenting, sometimes clashing with Trump out of fear as the party fractures. MAGA is turning on itself. More resignations and internal fights are coming, and Republicans are starting to speak out against Trump. The GOP has never been ideologically consistent, and now that governing requires it, their weakness is exposed. This show will keep calling it out. Hit subscribe, leave a like, and drop a blue heart in the comments, and until next time, I will see you soon.